I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. Turkey says it will control an entire 30-kilometer-long terror-free zone inside Syria along its border. Syrian Kurds have rejected this proposal, saying neutral UN forces must control any such safe zone. Russia says Syria's government must regain authority over those areas in order to preserve its territorial integrity and sovereignty. What will actually occur on the ground is yet to be seen. To discuss this a bit further, we're now joined by Mr. Abdulaziz Ramadan, who is joining us from Germany. He's a political analyst and is also founder and CEO of DOS International. And we're also joined by Mr. Yusuf Idem, who is TRT World's Turkey analyst, and he's joining us from Turkey itself. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Abdulaziz, I'd like to start with you, if I may. What do you make of the reactions that have come in since the announcement of these possible safe zones? What do you make of the Kurdish point of view on all this, Abdulaziz?
Thank you very much for the show, first of all. The Kurds actually in northeast Syria, they are afraid of the suggested plan by Trump, which is the safe zone, believing that already they have a safe area. They have defeated ISIS, almost defeated, and they have the means and the power to let's say, to secure the areas themselves. Coming to the recent suggested plan by Trump, which was just on Twitter, to make a safe zone in this time. This is totally illogical for the Kurds, believing that this might give the chance, for example, to Turkey to military occupy the northeast part of Syria. And therefore, it's totally rejected. It's causing a very high level of fear, not only among local Kurdish administration of northeast Syria, but also among the population.
So then what do the Kurds to happen then, Abdulaziz?
They want to first, if we talk about first the U.S. withdrawal, they believe this is not the time because ISIS is not totally defeated yet. There are still around 10,000 ISIS fighters in the area, and they are still being followed by the SDF forces, the Syrian Democratic Forces, in the reserve. This is one of the reasons. The other reason is the U.S. are there as a buffer power to prevent, let's say, the Turkish military, which is now located in Idlib, to come to the Kurdish region, and the Syrian Turkish-backed forces, which are the Off-Red Shields forces and the Olive Branch, who are now located in Idlib, to come to the northeast part of Syria. So if U.S. withdrawal happens, and if this safe zone area comes as a plan, as an alternative plan, there will be for sure clashes among Syrian Kurds and other Syrians in Idlib.
Okay, Yusuf, you've heard there Abdulaziz's point of view. I wanted to get Turkey's point of view on this because obviously Turkey is saying that it would control any such safe zone. What are your thoughts on that?
Now, first, we need to differentiate between Syrian Kurds and the YPG. Turkey doesn't have a problem with Syrian Kurds. Turkey has a problem with the YPG, which it views as the Syrian offshoot of the PKK, or the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is an outlawed terror group in Turkey, also the EU, also the United States. And this group is a direct threat to Turkey's national security. And by international law, Turkey has a right to protect its national security, whether inside its borders or across its borders. And that's what Turkey wants to do. That's why Turkey launched the Afrin operation, dubbed as Olive Branch, to protect its borders and the YPG element that was in that area. And now it wants to do the same by a 20-mile safe zone, or a 32-kilometer safe zone into the region where the YPG is very prevalent. Now, you like to use the word SDF. Let's not forget the SDF is made up of an 80% YPG majority, and the YPG has command over most of the SDF as well. Also, what Turkey wants to do is bring its Syrian-backed forces, Turkish-backed Syrian forces, into the region, create a safe zone, then create a stabilization force, as President Erdogan has stated about a week or two earlier in an op-ed he wrote. Create a stabilization force made up of Syrians, create local councils representing the demographics of the region as well, and provide good governance. Now, one of the major problems defeating ISIS is only half the battle. the other half of the battle is making sure ISIS doesn't revive. Now, to stop a revival, you need solid governance. Solid governance, happy citizens, representation of the people living there. And let's not forget that there are near 1 million Syrian refugees right now in Turkey who belong east of the Euphrates, out of the total 3.5 million still in Turkey. There's 300,000 Syrian Kurds from this region and another 700,000 who belong east of the Euphrates as well. Turkey wants to resettle these people. It's their right to go home, and they've been in Turkey for a very long time. Turkey has shouldered the burden up till now, but after it comes a point when these people need to go home, Syria needs to normalize, and normalization comes through resettlement.
You to be fair, though, as Abdulaziz there expressed earlier, there is nervousness, though, on the part of the Syrian Kurds. I'm not talking about the YPG specifically. I'm talking about the Syrian Kurdish population as well about any Turkish rule. What do you make of that?
Well, they shouldn't be nervous. They shouldn't be nervous because there's 15 million Turkish Kurds in Turkey, and the most populated city with the highest Kurdish population is Istanbul. Turkey has had a Kurdish president before. Turkey has a current intelligence chief who's of Kurdish descent as well. And Kurds and Turks have lived together for a very long time. So I don't buy into this YPG PKK propaganda that something's going to happen to the Syrian Kurds if Turkey comes there. Why did 300,000 Syrian Kurds flee the east of the Euphrates region and not come back under YPG rule? Let me
put that point then, Yusuf, to Aziz, if you allow me. Abdulaziz, I wanted to get your response to that. Do you think then that this is, as Yusuf said, YPG/PKK propaganda, that Syrian Kurds are nervous?
Well, I will totally understand Turkey concerns if it comes to the YPG forces. The SDF forces, majority are Kurdish forces. That's true because it's a Kurdish-dominated area. There are 3-4 million Kurds living in northeast Syria. Of course, it's a propaganda. I mean, this propaganda that the YPG is part or is an offshoot of the PKK, which is considered as a terrorist organization by Turkey, European Union, and US, this is the propaganda itself. Why we should look at them as terrorists? I mean, they are locals, they are defending their areas, and this is a big argument if you go through. On the other side, if you go to the Kurdish populations, they are afraid after what happened in Afrin. In Afrin, there were a lot of violations happened when Turkey-backed forces attacked the city. I mean, this is not against Turkey, but everybody saw on the news. It was widespread what happened from violations on the streets, looting, displacement of people. There were around 300,000 people displaced from Afrin when Afrin was attacked. On the other side, till now, there are many farmers. Afrin is an olive city. They have all farmers, the populations. Till now, most of the farmers, there are violations against farmers. Their lands have been taken from the locals, and they are afraid of demography process in Afrin. So all this, what happened in Afrin, this is what's pushing most of the Syrian Kurds, although they agree or disagree with the YPG or other military forces, to be concerned about any Turkish military interference in northeast Syria or any Syrian forces that are backed by Turkey. On the other side, if we look at the Syria as a whole, Syria now is in three main parts: Syrian Damascus, northeast Syria, which is controlled by the local Kurdish administration, and West Syria. So if we talk about stabilization, I believe this requires a political solution for whole Syria, for all conflicting parties to sit on one table and find a solution for whole Syria. But if we talk about a safe zone, I think time is too late for that.
Okay, I just want to take a time out because I know that we have a map which puts into context what we're discussing right now. I believe that map will come up on the screen soon. But we're talking about, obviously, as Abdulaziz there put, Yusuf, a divided Syria really at this point in time, if we're very honest. Do you think, Yusuf, that the involvement of Turkey is a good thing at this point in time, even for Turkey itself? Will this not be a very costly initiative to undertake? Why not hand it over to A, the United Nations, or B, the Syrian government itself in conjunction with the Russians? We know that Erdogan is going to be traveling to Russia soon too. I imagine that'll be proposed to him.
If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, and you can't outsource your own national security to someone else right now. And also, Turkey is the only guarantor of the Syrian opposition. Nobody's talking about the Syrian opposition anymore. People are already moving to normalize relations with Assad, which is way too soon. You can't normalize relations with Assad and then expect a positive political solution, because he's going to have all the power in his hands. And the only thing that's going to happen is we're going to go back to a pre-2011 situation. If everything was okay before 2011, the last 8 years wouldn't have happened. Now, one of the major things Turkey wants to do is resettle these Syrian opposition and Syrian refugee into these areas once again, so they can come back home and they actually have some type of bargaining chip at the table when a political solution is being granted and being met. So this is very, very important. Turkey's national security is very important. Now, some people say it's cross-border operations helpful. They are helpful. In the period after the political peace initiative between Turkey and the PKK, when it failed, there was an approximate 2.2 PKK attacks per day inside Turkey. After Operation Euphrates Shield, which mainly targeted Daesh, but also targeted PKK and YPG activities, that number dropped down to 1.09. After Operation Olive Branch, that number dropped down to 0.25 attacks per day, a 90% decline in terrorism. Now, this is a direct correlation between Turkey's operations against the YPG and a declining per day attack by the PKK inside Turkey. And as long as this data backs up what the Turkish government is trying to do, they feel very confident that they're doing the right thing.
Okay, so Abdiz, then, as both of you gentlemen have said, Turkey has legitimate concerns, Abdulaziz. So I'm wondering then, which party do you think, Abdulaziz, the Syrian Kurds would be comfortable then taking over, if I may use that term, even this region? Do you think that the Syrian Kurds should reach out to the Assad government, to Russia, or to the United Nations? Who should be leading this?
Well, if we should talk anyway about the safe zone. I mean, the Syrian Kurds would prefer for sure to have a national solution for whole Syria. That means they will prefer to talk to Damascus and Russia rather than to have, for example, a safe zone controlled by Turkey, which is not because of Turkey or US, but this is just to lead to a whole Syria in the future, and also to avoid any concerns that the local population has already. So it will be either to call on United Nations peacekeeping forces to control the area, or to control it, to be controlled and by the, of course, this is a big issue for Turkey. Although the local Kurdish administration, the Syrian Democratic Forces, just announced yesterday, like they don't have any concerns or anything against Turkey. They would prefer to, let's say, guard the safe zones themselves. But if it comes between Turkey and another solution, the Kurds will choose either Damascus or United Nations peacekeeping forces.
All right, so then again, Yusuf, I know I'm repeating myself, but why not give Damascus the chance? Because at the end of the day, even if Turkey does not like Bashar al-Assad at this point in time, the fact is, as Abdulaziz there said, that Damascus having a role in this situation would be good for Syria's national unity, for its territorial integrity, for its sovereignty. Wouldn't Turkey want that?
For two reasons. Reason number one, Assad's father, Hafiz Assad, was one of the founders, was one of the men that was instrumental in the creation of the PKK. And the YPG has always had a strong relationship with them, even while they were part of the U.S. coalition, which they still are. The Assad regime has an office in Qamishli, a liaison office in Qamishli, while their partner, the U.S., was supposedly fighting against not only Daesh, but also against Assad. The YPG was meeting with regime members the whole time, all throughout, since 2014, right after Kobani. That's one. And number two, this is not just a Syrian Kurd situation east of the Euphrates. You have to remember there's a lot of cities that are majority Sunni Arab, like Raqqa, like Deir ez-Zor, and many other cities as well. So I'm sorry, but the Syrian Kurds should not decide what happens with that area. There's a lot of Syrian opposition. There's a lot of tribe members that still want to return home that cannot return home. They just had a very big meeting in Jarablus about Manbij. And there was a Manbij conference about locals who want to go back home, but who are afraid because the YPG is there. Now, you have to remember, the YPG is a Marxist-Leninist group. Let's, for the sake of argument, let's not call them a terror organization, which they are, but let's not call them that for the sake of argument. They're a Marxist-Leninist group, borderline communist, and this does not appeal to the general population in that area, which is Sunni Arab, who is conservative, who is right-wing. Now, you asked what type of force could come in and help out along with Turkey. The Roj Peshmerga from Iraq, the KDP from Iraq, their groups, their forces could quite possibly maybe form a joint patrol with Turkey and maybe some UN forces that might be acceptable. I don't know. But that could be an idea that could be entertained until a real stabilization force is prepared. And that might put the Syrian Kurds at ease to know that next to the Turks, there are Iraqi Kurds helping out. So that's a possibility that could be debated.
I know our break, but Abdulaziz, and I know you have to go quickly as well, but if I may just quickly take a few more minutes of your time, Abdulaziz, do you think the involvement of Iraqi Kurds would put Syrian Kurds at ease?
Well, they are not the Iraqi Kurds. They are actually the Kurds who fled from the army, Syrian army, and made the Peshmerga Roj. The Peshmerga Roj, which is based in North Iraq, they are Kurdish fighters from Syria, Syrian Kurds. So they are Syrians. This is one of the options actually on the table, that this force to come and control the borders, let's say, which might make Turkey more comfortable, feeling safer on the borders. But this is still to be confirmed. This is a matter also of regional politics. I mean, it's about Turkey, it's about Iraq, it's about also Damascus, actually, on the other side, backed by Russia. So let's not forget that. But if it comes to a safe zone area, I mean, Peshmerga Roj could be one force that could, let's say, be helpful in the stabilization of the relation or of the situation, that Turkey feels better with that. But coming back to the population of the area, it's a diverse area. It's not only Kurds. It's not only Sunni. It's not only Shia. There are Christians, there are Armenians, there are Syrians actually living in Syria. We have 6 languages spoken in Syria. So coming back to any person, I mean, they are all Syrians. And this is exactly why we should push the situation to have not only a safe zone, in my opinion, but also to push into a national political solution that could provide not only stabilization, but a lasting peace for all Syrians in the near future.
Okay, we're going to go into a very short break now. We, of course, appreciate Abdulaziz Ramadan for his time. Yusuf, do stay with us. Viewers will be right back with more on this situation. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to discuss this proposal about safe zones to be set up in northern Syria. We're joined still by Yusuf Irim, TRT World's Turkey analyst, who's joining us from Istanbul. We're now also joined by Mr. Egemen Bagis, who is the former Minister of EU Affairs for Turkey, and he's joining us from Istanbul as well. Egemen, thanks for joining us here in the scope at this time. And Yusuf, thank you for remaining with us. Egemen, if I may, I'd like to start with you and, again, discuss this proposal of Turkey essentially controlling any safe zone completely. Do you think that that is a healthy way to go about this? Because as we've been discussing before you came on right now, there is a concern then, of course, about Syrian sovereignty, isn't there?
Well, Turkey is very much determined to clear her neighborhood from all types of terrorism. The YPG elements, the PKK elements, the FETÖ elements, the Daesh elements, and ISIS elements are posing threats to Turkey's national security and Turkey's well-being, and we cannot tolerate that. So Turkey is determined to establish a safe zone around the border to make sure that they are far away from harm's length, to make sure that they cannot pose a threat to our national security and to the well-being of our citizens. And we have made this very clear to our allies and partners and to global powers, and they have understood that Turkey is determined, and no matter what the ideology, nationality, religion, or ethnicity of these terrorists are, we are determined to eliminate them.
But Egemen, I imagine Damascus would say, and Damascus obviously, as you can imagine, Egemen, is against this entire proposal, saying that it does threaten Syria's sovereignty. Why not, even if Turkey does have a disagreement with Bashar al-Assad, why not talk to Bashar al-Assad about Turkey's concerns and come to some sort of a united resolution, if I may use that term?
Damascus only has control over 20% of Syria as we speak. Unfortunately, they have created this vacuum, this gap for terrorist elements to flourish. That's why we have to step in and take necessary measures to protect ourselves. If there was a strong and legitimate sovereign government in Damascus, they would be protecting their land from terrorists themselves, but they cannot. They can hardly protect their own leader. So we have spoken to Russia, to the United States, to Iran, and we have made consultations with our European allies, and we have decided to protect ourselves.
Okay. Yusuf, let me bring you back. What do you make, Yusuf, of the fact that Russia as well, as Egemen there said, yes, Turkey, of course, has been talking to Russia, I'm sure, about this situation, but Russia has expressed, pessimism about Turkey alone taking on the role of controlling any such safe zone, saying again that Damascus should be fulfilling that role. What do you feel about Russia's role in all of this, Yusuf?
Now, of course, Russia is trying to protect Assad and keep him propped up. So they might have some concerns about Turkey establishing a safe zone in the area, because this is obviously going to strengthen the hand of the Syrian opposition, which Turkey is the guarantor of. But Turkey and Russia have always been able to reach a deal. Erdogan and Putin are close friends, and hence they have a pragmatic relationship. So I don't foresee that Russia being too much of a problem once Turkey and the U.S. have reached a deal for a safe zone in that region. I don't think Russia is going to have too many objections to it. But I believe what Russia wants to do mainly is gather the rest of the land that the U.S. coalition has in its control, Deir ez-Zor mainly because of the oil fields on the U.S. coalition side of that territory. And Raqqa, of course, is of interest to Assad as well. But like I said, we need to remember Turkey not only represents itself, Turkey represents the Syrian opposition. I feel the Syrian opposition has been forgotten lately in all of this, and we cannot talk about a political solution if they're not at the table represented properly.
Okay, let me add another to this conversation, gentlemen. We're now joined with Ms. Eva Kalouriotis, who is a political analyst, and she's joining us from the Greek capital, Athens. She's a political analyst, as I said. She specializes in the Middle East and has written and commented in various newspapers as well, such as Al-Quds, etc. Eva, thanks for joining us and for your time. What are your thoughts, Eva, about these safe zones as they've been proposed? Do you believe, Eva, that Turkey and the United States will be able to come to an understanding or have already come to an understanding regarding that?
First of all, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. The truth is that U.S. and Turkey are trying to reach, in a way, a cooperation in the east of Syria in order to control the area, the Manbij city mostly. There is a proposal, preliminary proposal from the U.S. for a safe zone from the Iraqi borders until the Euphrates River, which is a length of 370 kilometers and in a depth of 20 miles. Recently, as you may know, there was a meeting between the Americans and a Syrian delegation led by Ahmed al-Jabra, the leader, a visitor in Ankara, with the Syrian delegation led by Ahmed al-Jabra, a leader of the military groups of the Arabs who are supported by the international coalition in Washington, and they are a part of SDF. This visit came after this discussion between Bolton in his visit in Ankara. The delegation of the Kurds carried an American offer in this that takes over the task of protecting the safe area which extends from the Iraqi border to the Euphrates River. Ankara, since this group is Sunni Arabs, has not rejected this idea, and it's likely to and wants to coordinate this area with Washington.
Right.
But this discussion is still on. Ankara wants to keep its troops within the region. And will also want to set up monitoring centers in coordination with Washington and the Kurdish militias withdraw to the south of the region, and France, Britain, Italy and Germany might remain with special forces to support the stability of these militia areas.
Let me put that question to Yusuf Iram. What do you make of whether the U.S. really will be able to come to a resolution with Turkey right now about safe zones? Do you think it'll be more just distracted by what's happened in Manbij?
First, I don't think the Manbij attack is gonna negatively affect the U.S.-Syria withdrawal. Exact opposite. I think it justifies President Trump in wanting to withdraw his troops. If the Pentagon listened to Trump at the beginning and the withdrawal was much quicker, those troops wouldn't have been in Manbij. They wouldn't have been the target of the Daesh attack. They would have been in their back in their beds in the United States, sleeping safely. But dragging these other factions inside D.C., whether it be the State Department, the NSA, the Pentagon, working against Trump, the commander-in-chief has reached a decision. He's given a directive. It's their jobs to carry out those directives, not act in their own self-interest. So those 4 to 5 soldiers, I don't know the exact number, but their lives are on the hands of the people who delayed this withdrawal. Now, going back to the U.S. and Turkey, I believe Senator Lindsey Graham, a very important Republican senator, is in Ankara as we speak. He's going to be meeting with President Erdogan today and many other top-level officials. So they're going to be talking about more details of a withdrawal. So we might have more details later on today, maybe earlier tomorrow, of what type of agreement could be reached. Now, Turkey never wanted the U.S. to leave Syria. This withdrawal, Turkey did not want this withdrawal. But if the U.S. is going to withdraw, Turkey's ready to highly coordinated withdrawal. So a U.S. presence wasn't detrimental to the Turkish presence. U.S. support for the YPG is the problem that was always existing between Turkey and the United States inside Syria. Once that's solved, there is no problem between the U.S. and Turkey and Syria. In the end, they both want to fight terror. They both want to finish off Daesh. And they both want a political solution that leads to free and fair elections. So both sides are not really that far apart. There's just a small red line that needs to be solved. And once that small red line is solved, I have a feeling that D.C. and Ankara will be fully on board with each other.
Eva, do you agree with that, Eva? Because I imagine that, and as you know, Eva, there was that discussion between Russia and Turkey as well when President Trump announced this withdrawal from Syria, and seemingly Russia and Turkey had come to some sort of an understanding about ensuring that any vacuum that may be created with the U.S. withdrawing would be filled. What do you make of that, Eva? Do you think that U.S. and Turkey really are completely on board with each other, or do you think that there's something else going on behind the scenes?
First of all, I agree that the U.S. troops will not withdraw as originally announced. It might take even 6 months, from 3 to 6 months to withdraw. And it's for sure U.S. will keep some troops there. On the other hand, we have to consider that Moscow does not accept this safe zone area. So Turkey has also to face this. That's why we will see what will happen from the meeting of Erdogan with Putin on the 23rd of this month.
Okay, and Yusuf, what do you think come out of that meeting, as Eva there spoke about? Because a lot of people are looking forward to that meeting, Yusuf, where I imagine, of course, Russia will register its unhappiness with any such safe zone plan as we've spoken about right now. As I said, of course, Russia making a very clear statement. I believe it was Lavrov who said that that they want Syria to take over, as in the Damascus government to take over any such initiative. Do you think that Erdogan and Putin will come to some sort of an understanding over this?
I definitely think they'll come to some sort of understanding. And one of the main reasons why they'll come to some sort of understanding is because Putin knows that Turkey's presence in that region will be limited. And having the U.S. remove itself from the equation, which a U.S. presence, as we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan, could last a decade, 2 decades, is a huge win for Putin. So he would much rather have a temporary Turkish presence than rather have a long-term U.S. presence. And he understands the best way of getting America out of the equation is by having Turkey insert itself into the equation. So I don't think he's going to cause too many problems for Turkey. He understands Turkey's security concerns. He knows Turkey's going to come in, address its security concerns, establish the refugees that belong in that region, resettle them, which in the end will be positive for the political solution, which is something that Putin greatly desires, because topping his agenda right now is rebuilding Syria. And he knows that he cannot rebuild Syria without EU funds, without US funds, without Arab funds. And what everyone wants to see is real steps towards a political solution before they start committing financing towards a rebuilding. And in the end, whether Putin likes it or not, whether Russia likes it or not, they're going to have to reach a deal with Turkey. These Syrian opposition and these Syrian refugees are going to have to be resettled. And there's going to have to be steps taken towards a constitutional committee and free and fair elections. So this right now is a necessary step to get to that end game.
All right, so Eva, now that Yusuf brought up this issue of a political solution in Syria, Eva, do you think where you're sitting, for example, in Europe, that the Europeans would see a safe zone as a good first step, in fact, towards any such resolution, permanent resolution, one would hope, in Syria? And that would be then a good thing, Eva, on the part of the EU to then open up its pockets and possibly begin funding reconstruction?
European countries, they first of all, they see in a good way the option of having some sort of peace in the area. But about the reconstruction, as we have seen in the already, they are not ready to proceed with adding too many funds. I'm not sure if they will be when they will be ready. If we don't have soon a political solution in Syria, and I believe that it's something that will take a lot of time. It will not happen so fast. So the Europeans, since they are facing many internal problems, will wait for this. They are not ready to proceed with offering funds for the reconstruction of Syria.
Okay, so
we have to point out that
right.
it is an enormous sum of money. We're talking about half a trillion already.
Right. Eva, I'll give you the final word if I may, because we're running out of time. So I wanted to get your final thoughts, Eva. Do you think that, that the political solution, you said, of course, will take a very long time to reach when it comes to Syria, but do you think that right now we're even seeing the beginnings of that? Because it seems that we're at a stalemate situation, aren't we? And no one is really budging.
I believe that now all players in the area are trying to get gains step by step. We see that with Turkey. We see that with Russia. Russia wants Russia needs Syria as a unique entity, one entity. They don't want pieces of the country. So until they will be able to reach some sort of agreement with all players to unify the country, we will not have a final result. And Ankara is doing the same. They are trying to protect themselves from the Kurds, because for them it's a major security issue, to protect their borders. So they are trying to gain this north part of the eastern Syria, as they did with Afrin and the Euphrates Shield area, as we have seen. So step by step they are trying to get as much as they can. In the same context, we will see that it's likely to see that in exchange for this area, Russia will try to get as much as they can from the Idlib area of the opposition, something that is agreed in the Sochi agreement, and they will want to control the road between Latakia and Aleppo. Which is something to be seen after the meeting between Erdogan and Putin. Therefore, it will take more time to have a clear picture about what will finally happen and what will be the result of all this.
Very well. We'll leave that as a word, but of course we appreciate all of our guests. Let me thank them from the top. We were joined there by Eva Kourouriotis, who is speaking to us from Athens, political analyst, and she's specializes, of course, in the Middle East, and she writes and comments in Arabic newspapers as well. We were joined by Mr. Yusuf Iram as well, TRT World's Turkey analyst, who is speaking to us from Istanbul. Earlier we were joined by Agman Bagis, former Minister of EU Affairs for Turkey, and he was speaking to us from Istanbul as well. And earlier at the beginning of the program, we had Abdulaziz Ramadan speaking to us from Germany. He's a political analyst and founder and CEO of DOS International. Now, viewers, as all of our guests there spoke about, Turkey does seemingly have legitimate concerns about its security on its border vis-a-vis what it calls terrorist organizations. The Syrian government, as I said, has expressed unhappiness, as so have the Russians, by the way, for Turkey to take over any role of controlling a safe zone within Syrian territory, that is. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that meeting that takes place between Erdogan and Putin in Moscow in the coming weeks and days. We'll keep a very close eye on the results of that and what happens with these safe zones and how this may affect any peace process that may or may not begin through this. We'll stay with that, but stay here in the scope. I'll be back after a short break with our next segment. Viewers, thank you for staying with us here in the scope. In this segment, we're going to discuss Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is on a trip to Serbia. He's received red carpet treatment and has been welcomed by large crowds. Russia, since rejecting a UN resolution describing the 1995 Srebrenica massacre as genocide, has worked hard to strengthen its relations with Serbs. This is at a time that NATO is seeking influence over the Balkans, and Serbia even eyes EU membership. To discuss all of that a bit further, we're joined now by Mr. Mark Sloboda, who is an international affairs and security analyst, and he's joining us from Moscow. We're also joined by Ms. Shamsa Nawaz, who is a senior research fellow at ISSI, which is the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad. She's joining us from the Pakistani capital. Thank you both for joining us. Mark, I'd like to start with you, if I may. How important is this trip of the Russian president to Serbia? What message is being sent here, do you think?
Well, in particular, this trip is very important for the Serbian president Vučić, who has been enduring protests both from the nationalists and the liberal side for some 6 weeks in Belgrade and other cities. So this show of support for his administration by the Russian president, who is immensely popular in Serbia, with some more than 100,000 people turning out to welcome him on the trip there, is a big show of domestic support. There's also a good deal of energy deals. Serbia gets all of its energy, all of its gas anyway, from Russia, and Gazprom owns the majority of Serbia's gas and oil state company. So there are very strong energy ties there, and there is very much a spiritual and religious affiliation between the two as well, with Russia contributing, gifting mosaics for the Serbian national church, as it were, Saint Slava, which is the second largest Orthodox church in the world. And that is seen as a very big soft power gesture of goodwill from Russia to the Serbian people.
Okay, Shamsa Nawaz, one of the factors here which I imagine plays into this trip is that of the fact that Serbia does want to join the European Union as well. How important do you think it is then for the Russian president to be making this trip at this time and signing all these deals?
Thank you for having me to discuss the issue, the recent visit. As we all know, and very rightly said by Marx, that all the Balkan states, basically, they are emotively attached to Russia, I may say so. And we know that the West's interest of increasing the NATO membership of these Balkan states is considered as a destabilizing factor in the European countries. And if we look at, there are two ways of looking at Russia's interest in Eastern European countries in particular, and in Europe in general. One is that Russia is gradually increasing its influence in the European countries, not only by having energy contacts, increasing energy contacts with the Eastern European countries or the Balkan states. Russia has also have a great energy contact with the Germans, and the Germany has been criticized by the Trump regime itself, and Trump himself has also condemned the increasing influence of Russia in Germany. So looking at it from both sides, the interpersonal relationship between Russia and Serbia, of course, we have Slavs living over there, their support of Kosovo, of course. Also, you know that between Russia and Moscow, there is an affection found in Serbian province for emotive issue like Kosovo already. So these are the factors which are at the level of the relationship between the two countries, right? And overall, if you look at the European policies towards Russia, Russia is increasing its influence over there.
Okay, so if I may, I apologize for interrupting you, Shanaz, but I wanted to bring up with you, Mark, a point which I think is important to mention here, isn't it, Mark, that we need to look historically as well at this region, do we not? And one can go back to the entire issue when it came to Yugoslavia and the Srebrenica massacre, etc. I'm not trying to connect apples and oranges here, but it is important, isn't it, Mark, to look at that 2015 vote which took place at the UN and Russia not signing on to that, calling the Srebrenica massacre genocide, which pretty much most of the world did sign on to. Why do you think that is? Do you think that plays a bit of a role? Because if we say on one hand that Russia's concerns are based on NATO/EU when it comes to Serbia or other Balkan countries, then on the other side one can say, one can question Russia and what its role then is vis-a-vis Bosnia, for example, and others.
Yeah, so certainly there is a very important historical relations between Serbia and Russia, and we can look back at this as an anniversary of World War I and see this as a very important lesson. All right, the Balkan is once again a geopolitical tinderbox. And we are once again living in a world of multipolar great powers, and we certainly don't want to see instability in the Balkans leading to another global conflagration as it does in World War I. Now, I don't necessarily see that on the cards, but Russia certainly keeps that in mind. Now, it's important to notice that Russia does not object to Serbia joining the EU. Actually, Russia wants Serbia to join the EU. By not joining the EU, Serbia does Russia no good. Russia is only Serbia's fifth largest trading partner. It's completely surrounded by the EU. It needs it for economic relations. And it's not going to interrupt energy trade between Russia and Serbia by joining the EU. But by having Serbia within the EU as a voice of Russian solidarity, if you will, as a Trojan horse, at least is the way they look at it in the European Union, which does rely for many issues on consensus, that is very advantageous to Russia. But Russia does not support Serbia or the other Balkan countries joining NATO, which is the world's largest, most powerful, and most objectively aggressive military bloc on the planet.
Okay, just because we're running out of time, Mark, I do apologize for interrupting you. I wanted to give the final word, if you allow me, to Shamsa Nawaz. Shamsa Nawaz, I wanted to ask you, as I put to Mark there as well, wouldn't it be concerning for the EU to have Serbia join it when we've had many politicians, Serb politicians, be they even Bosnian Serbs or in Serbia itself, who have denied what's happened, as in massacre or genocide that's occurred when it came historically, if we're talking about Srebrenica or Yugoslavia as a whole, towards the Muslims there?
Yeah, if you look at it from that point of view, yes, certainly it will be a major concern for the European Union. But at the same time, as Mark has already pointed out, that Russia does not object to Serbia's joining in of EU path. And as a matter of fact, if we look at it from that point of view, it encourages Serbia to join EU, basically, because it is a very strategic contact between East and the West for them, right? So these things could be overlooked, even if, like you have to see for how does EU want Serbia to be a partner over there. Maybe it can be used as a Trojan horse by the Russians, but at the same time, it could be used by the European Union as well to improve the interest or the relationship between the two countries.
Very well, Shamsa Nawaz, we'll leave it there as our final word. Of course, we appreciate both of your times and insights and analysis as you provided on this very important trip, of course, of President Putin there to Serbia. Let me thank our guests. We were joined there by Mr. Mark Sloboda, International Affairs and Security Analyst, who was speaking to us from the Russian capital. We were also joined by Ms. Shamsa Nawaz, who is Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad. We appreciate her time and analysis as well. Viewers, of course, as I said, this is an important trip that the Russian president has made to Serbia. A historical context is extremely important here. We weren't able to address that too fully in this segment, but we will for sure come back to that important historical context of these Russian relations with these Balkan states as well in future episodes here on The Scope. But thanks for watching. I've been Waqar Rizvi.